Yeah, good evening, everyone. Yeah, myself, Dr. Praneeth from Hyderabad. I'm an ENT consultant, and today, from the AIM for PG platform, I would like to discuss about the topic Meniere's disease. So straight away, we'll go into the Meniere's disease. A lot of time has been already lost. So before going into the topic, I would request all the students not to take any notes right now. A separate notes will be given after the class. Just concentrate on the class for the next 20 minutes. And after that, you will be getting a soft copy of the notes after that class. So don't concentrate on taking the notes. Concentrate on the class, right? So coming to the Meniere's disease. So here, this Meniere's disease is mainly, it is a pathology of the inner ear. So if you see the inner ear, you have got a outer bony part and the inner membranous part. So in the inner membranous part, you have got endolymph inside, right? And in the bony labyrinth, you have got perilymph outside. You all know the endolymph is rich in potassium and perilymph is rich in sodium. This is the one of the important MCQ being repeatedly asked. So endolymph being rich in potassium and the perilymph being rich in sodium, there will be a difference of potassium endolymphatic potential between these two that will be responsible for the nerve impulse generation. So leave it.
Can you please zoom this?
Yes.
Zoom, sir, please.
Zoom, huh? I'm sharing the screen, no?
Yes, sir. Please zoom, sir. Zoom out.
It's almost full screen. Can you see the cursor? Can you see the cursor on the screen?
Yes, sir. It's okay. You can continue, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. So in the membranous labyrinth, in Meniere's disease, what happens? There will be increased amount of the endolymph. So the increased amount of the endolymph will cause the distension of the membranous labyrinth. See, if you see this is the normal ear and this is the Meniere's disease ear. So you can see the distension of the endolymphatic sac inside. So you all know your cochlea is concerned with hearing and your vestibule part containing your saccule, utricle and the semicircular canals is concerned with the balance. So mainly in Meniere's disease, you will be having these two symptoms by the patient. The hearing loss because of the cochlear malfunctioning and vertigo because of the vestibular malfunctioning. You can also see there is an endolymph overproduction inside the membranous labyrinth. So the endolymph is causing a bulge over here. That's why this condition is also called as endolymphatic hydrops. Hydrops means any swelling that is caused due to a fluid. So here, which is causing the swelling? That is your endolymph fluid. The fluid endolymph is causing your swelling inside. That's why it is endolymphatic hydrops. The same condition, hydrops fetalis like thing, where there is excessive amniotic fluid in your gynecology, right? So coming to the ear, you have three parts, right? Your external ear pinna, continuing into the auditory canal, tympanic membrane, and the middle ear, and then the inner ear, where you have the spiral cochlea connected to the vestibule part posteriorly. Your semicircular canals will be lying posteriorly, and all the nerve impulses will be carrying with the help of vestibular nerve from the vestibular part and cochlear nerve from the cochlear part. So the hearing from the cochlea through the cochlear nerve into the brain, and from the vestibule through the vestibular nerve into the brain. So this nerve, cochlear and vestibular, jointly called as vestibulocochlear nerve, your eighth cranial nerve, which is purely sensory, that carries both of your hearing sensation as well as your balance sensation. So coming to the inner ear, so you can see there is a spiral cochlea anteriorly connected to your vestibule, which contains your saccule and utricle, and then connected to your three semicircular canals, right? So if I take a cross section at the cochlear level, if I take a small cross section of the cochlea, and if I see the cross section of the cochlea will be like this. It will be having three chambers inside, scala vestibuli and scala tympani and the periphery, and scala media in the middle. This scala media is nothing but is a part of your, it's a continuation of your membranous labyrinth. Okay, So in the scala media part on the lateral wall, you will be having the stria vascularis, which is responsible for the production of the endolymph inside. And in the scala vestibuli and tympani part, you will be having the perilymph. So as there is the endolymph is being produced by the stria vascularis. In Meniere's, what happens? There is increased endolymph production by the stria vascularis. So what does it cause? It causes the increased amount of pressure on the surrounding parts. This is a closed sac, right? Membranous labyrinth is completely a closed sac, and the amount of fluid produced is equal to the amount of drained outside from the endolymphatic sac. But here what happens in Meniere's, there will be over excessive production of endolymph. So that will cause pressure even on your organ of Corti lying on your basilar membrane. So this is the basilar membrane on which your organ of Corti, which is the main basic structural and functional unit of your hearing. So that lies there. So in Meniere's, what happens when you take the organ of Corti separately and see, as in the membranous part, in the scala media part, there is increased endolymph, and this increased endolymph will cause increased amount of pressure on the sensory structure here. Your sensory structure has got these hair cells, inner hair cells and outer hair cells, and while you hear the sound, these hair cells are most important for generating the nerve impulses that are being carried by your auditory nerve or cochlear nerve inside. So what happens? Due to increased endolymph inside, when there is increased pressure on the organ of Corti, what happens? There is the nerve conduction is impeded. So the nerve conduction, as the sensory structures are getting affected and the neural structures are unable to conduct the impulses, this kind of hearing loss is called as sensory neural kind of hearing loss. There is a difference. Another type of hearing loss is conductive hearing loss. That will be seen in case of any pathologies in the external ear as well as middle ear, right? But coming to the inner ear as well as your retrocochlear lesions like acoustic neuroma, you can see the sensory neural type of pattern. Here the pathology will be in the sensory structures as well as the neural structures, right? So hope you understood the sensory neural hearing loss reason in case of Meniere's. And as you see in the inner ear, apart from your cochlea, there is another structure that is maintaining your balance, responsible for your balance. That is your vestibule part. Having a in the inside of the vestibule, you will be having the saccule and a utricle. And apart from that, you will be having 3 semicircular canals, right? So in the saccule and in the utricle, you will be having the sensory structures called maculae, right? What these maculae are responsible for? These are responsible for linear acceleration. Again, this is an important MCQ. Maculae in the saccule and utricle are responsible for linear acceleration. And again, in that, your saccule is arranged vertically. That is responsible for vertical movements. Vertical linear movements are censored by the saccule. Like example, you are going in a lift up or down. That movement, that kind of movement is censored by your saccule. And just a minute. And you have the utricle, which has horizontally arranged maculae. When you are going in a vehicle forward or backward, that kind of linear movement will be detected by your utricle. And your semicircular canals will detect the angular acceleration. So when there is increased amount of endolymph inside, what happens? Not only your organ of Corti is being compressed, also your maculae as well as cristae in the semicircular canals are also getting compressed due to the increased amount of pressure inside. So due to that increased amount of pressure, they also cannot conduct impulses properly, causing a vertigo to the patient, because their normal function is maintaining the balance. When they get diseased, they cannot conduct proper impulses. That causes vertigo in a Meniere's patient. And this is your endolymphatic sac. All the fluid produced in the stria vascularis in the cochlea is circulated in the entire membranous labyrinth, and that is drained out through the endolymphatic duct and then into the endolymphatic sac and then into the surrounding, right? So the amount of endolymph produced here is equally maintained, is equal to the amount of endolymph released here. So that should be maintained equal. Any imbalance, either excessive production here or decreased absorption here. So anything can cause inside increased amount of endolymph and can give rise to all these symptoms. So this anatomical diagram was given in the JIPMER last year, and it was asked, what is this structure? To identify, it was asked to identify this structure, that is your endolymphatic sac, right? And coming to the actual Meniere's pathogenesis, see here you have got your membranous labyrinth and surrounding your bony labyrinth, perilymph surrounding, endolymph inside and perilymph surrounding. Normally, they should be maintained separately for this endolymphatic potential to be maintained. They should lie separate. They should not mix with each other. But due to increased amount of pressure inside, increased amount of endolymph inside, this membrane ruptures at some part of the time. Sometimes at some part where there is least tension, this membrane will get ruptured. So what happens when gradually, when there is increasing amount of endolymph inside, so there is gradually increasing amount of pressure over your sensory organs. So what happens, there will be gradually increasing amount of hearing loss, right? So at a certain point of time, this ruptures suddenly, this endolymph will get mixed with the perilymph. So what happens at this time, the patient will be having a sudden vertigo attack, and also a high amount of hearing loss will be there. And then, so gradually what happens next, the membranes will slowly heal, and again the normality will be restored. They will become again normal. So once they are becoming the normal, once the membranes are restored, healing happens. What happens is that again there is now no pressure. So there is no pressure on your sensory organs. So there are no complaints by the patient, no hearing loss right now. But again, as there is a excessive production of endolymph, the tendency to produce excessive endolymph. So what happens? Again, the endolymph will keep on increasing. Again, there will be a increased amount of pressure. Again, rupture happens, and again there will be a mixing of the endolymph and perilymph, and again a sudden vertigo attack. So some patients will be complaining that they will be having sudden vertigo attacks. So this is the reason for that. And also see the hearing loss, as there is increasing amount of endolymph gradually inside, there is increasing amount of hearing loss complained by the patient. When this rupture occurs, maximum loss of hearing. And again, when the healing occurs, again the hearing loss has gone. Now it is becoming normal. So this kind of increasing and decreasing, this kind of hearing loss is called a fluctuating type of sensorineural type of hearing loss. This fluctuating sensorineural hearing loss is typically seen in case of Meniere's disease, right? So coming to the symptoms, as we know already, the patient will be having a vertigo and a fluctuating sensorineural hearing loss and tinnitus and oral fullness. So remember, someone is writing over the screen. Kindly don't write anything over the screen. I can see some marks coming over the screen. I request who is doing that, kindly do that. Kindly don't do that writing over the screen. Yeah. So coming back to Meniere's, the symptoms which you can see in case of Meniere's are vertigo first, and then oral fullness, and then sensorineural type of hearing loss, and then tinnitus. So it will be vertigo first. The most important point here you should remember is the vertigo will be coming first to the patient, followed by hearing loss next. And this is most commonly seen in males around 35 to 60 years of age. It is seen mostly unilateral, and some people will be having familial inheritance. The COG gene on chromosome 14 is responsible for that. And most of the times Meniere's disease is idiopathic. You don't know the exact reason. But if you know the exact reason, sometimes the patient may be having some associated autoimmune diseases, SLE, rheumatoid arthritis, like things. In such cases, if there is Meniere's, then that can be due to this autoimmune pathology. In such cases where you know the cause, like autoimmune disease or viral infection or hypothyroidism, that causes that condition, you can call it as Meniere's syndrome. If it is idiopathic, it is Meniere's disease. If the cause is known, then it is Meniere's syndrome. And these symptoms are very important. Remember the sequence, and the mnemonic you can remember simple commonly used English word VAST, so that you can remember. vertigo, oral fullness, sensorineural hearing loss, and tinnitus. And coming to the Tullio phenomena. What is Tullio's phenomena? It means that is sound-induced vertigo. Tullio phenomena means it is a sound-induced vertigo. So normally when you hear the sound, you should be able to perceive the sound. You should not get vertigo. But in case of Meniere's disease, what is happening? The patient is getting vertigo whenever he hears the loud sounds. So why this is happening means, normally whenever the sound waves enter your ear, they strike the tympanic membrane, and these vibrations are carried by the ossicles into the inner ear. These vibrations will be transmitted into the inner ear fluids. Those fluids will vibrate, and those vibrations will cause auditory conduction into the brain. In case of Tullio's phenomena, the distended saccule, due to increased amount of endolymph, the distended saccule will lie near to the foot plate. So what happens, whenever the sound gets conducted, the foot plate vibrates. These vibrations are taken into the saccule part instead of going into the cochlea. So in saccule there are sensory organs of balance, so that those get irritated and the patient will feel vertigo. So that is why what is meant by your Tullio phenomena, that is called as Tullio phenomena means sound induced vertigo. And coming to the clinical examination, when you do otoscopy, absolutely it will be normal because there's no problem with the tympanic membrane. And if you do tuning fork test, they will show a sensorineural hearing loss type of pattern. Rini positive, Weber lateralized towards better ear, and absolute bone conduction will be reduced when compared to the examiner. So this is a pattern of sensorineural hearing loss. If it is conductive, Rini should be negative, Weber should be lateralized towards worse ear. That is conductive loss. But in here, you are having sensorineural pattern. And if you get a pure tone audiometry done, you can see the lower frequencies getting affected initially. See, these are the lower frequencies, 125 Hertz, 250 Hertz, 500 Hertz. So these low frequency sounds are heard at the apex, and gradually as you go to the middle frequencies, and if you go towards the basal coil of the cochlea, you will hear the higher frequencies. Initially, in case of Meniere's disease, this apex is affected first. So naturally, the apex, which is responsible for hearing low frequency sounds, so that low frequency sounds will be getting affected first. But as disease progresses, later on, the middle frequencies as well as the high frequencies will also get affected. So whenever a patient presents with vertigo and on pure tone audiometry, you see a low frequency hearing loss, suspect Meniere's in that case. And also other audiometries where you can see a dip in 2000 Hertz, that is in otosclerosis you can see. And if you see a dip at 4000 Hertz, that is seen in noise-induced hearing loss. These points will be given in the notes that will be provided to you on the website after the class. Okay. And the other investigations that you do generally to differentiate between Meniere's and other diseases are speech discrimination score, rollover phenomena, recruitment, CC score, tone decay, stapedial reflex, BERA. So all these we will discuss. And the glycerol test is important because here the main problem in the Meniere's is overproduction of the fluid endolymph. This glycerol is a dehydrating agent. Once you give glycerol, there will be a decrease in the amount of endolymph. So what happens naturally, there will be decrease in the amount of pressure inside, so that your sensory structures will start back functioning normal again. So that means there will be symptoms will be improved again. So this is a diagnostic as well as a prognostic test. And coming to the speech discrimination score, see, the simply saying speech discrimination score means how well a patient can discriminate his speech. That is speech discrimination score. Normally 90 to 100%. Most of the words the patient will be able to discriminate, or he will be able to repeat whenever we ask him to repeat. That means the normal scoring will be 90 to 100%. In case of cochlear lesions, it will be a little bit less, like in your Meniere's disease. And in case of retrocochlear lesions like acoustic neuroma, it will be very poor, somewhere around 30 to 40% even. And coming to the recruitment phenomena, this is typically seen in cochlear lesions like your Meniere's disease. See, this is the right ear and right normal ear and left diseased ear. This patient is having other than Meniere's disease. And this patient, if you see, this patient is having Meniere's disease. The right side is the normal ear and left side is the Meniere's disease ear. Here, if you see, if I give a 20 decibel sound to this patient, having a disease other than Meniere's disease. Left ear is having hearing loss. Here's approximately 20 decibels loss is there. If I give a 20 decibel sound, right ear is normal. So he will hear that sound as 20 decibel sound only. But coming to the left ear, as he's having 20 decibels loss, he will hear it as 0. When I give a 30, he's having 20 decibels loss, he will hear it as 10. 40 will be heard as 20. Likewise, there will be linear disparity. But if you see in case of Meniere's patient, see the right ear is normal here in this patient, left ear is got a Meniere's disease. See, if I give a 30 decibel sound, this ear is normal, so it hears the same 30 decibel sound. But if you come to left ear, due to some sensorineural hearing loss, it will hear it as a 0 decibel sound. But when I increase 10 decibels here, the diseased ear is hearing it as more than the 10 decibel difference. In the normal ear, there is a 10 decibel difference sound is given. I increased the sound by 10 decibels and given as 40 decibels. The normal ear is hearing it as 40 only. We expect if there is 30 decibels loss according to this loss, we expect the patient to hear this sound as 10 decibels, but see some gain is there. So
Hello,
this
sir.
Yes.
Hello, sir. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to announce something. This session may end after 1.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Done it.
Start it. Yes, sir. Now you
Yeah.
can zoom and start.
Yeah. Sorry for the short outage, dear students. So we are discussing about recruitment phenomena, right? So this recruitment phenomena is exclusively seen in the cases of Meniere's disease, in patients of Meniere's disease. Here we were comparing between two patients who were having hearing loss. This patient is having left-sided hearing loss, but it is of some other pathology. Here we are having a Meniere's disease patient on left side. So we'll see both patients right side ear is normal. So in this other diseased patient, other than Meniere's disease patient, he's having some 20 decibels of hearing loss on the left side. So whenever we give a 20 decibel sound, it is being heard as 20 on right side as it is normal. But the abnormal side, the left side being having 20 decibels loss, he is hearing it as 0. Likewise, 30 will be heard as 10, 40 will be heard as 20 here. But in case of Meniere's disease, if you take the 30 is being heard as 0, so we will expect the same thing as 40 will be heard as 10. But what's happening here, some extra gain is being getting by the Meniere's disease patient in case of cochlear lesion. This phenomena, this unusual attainment, recruitment of the hearing is called as recruitment phenomena, right? So you can see if the frequency, if the intensity is increased, still the patient is getting different frequency, different intensity sounds. Likewise, so if you compare it, see, it's not uniform loss is there. There is for different intensities, different loss is there. So that's what is called as recruitment phenomena. And these patients are poor candidates for hearing aids. So if you see for hearing aid, the parts of the hearing aid, the most important parts of a hearing aid are the microphone for receiving the sound signal and the amplifier which amplifies the signals, and then it sends these amplified signals into the receiver. So from there, the sounds will be emitted into your ear, right? So what happens in this patient, other than Meniere's disease, if I give a hearing aid to the left ear with the amplification of 20 decibels, so what happens? This 20 decibel sound will be heard as, normally he was hearing it as 0. As I have given hearing aid of 20 amplification, the 20 will be added and he will hear it as the same 20 decibels. So no problem. Likewise, the 30 will be heard as 30, right? Similar. But when you come to the Meniere's disease patient, for example, in case of this patient, the left ear is having a Meniere's disease, right? So, for example, if we suspect 30 decibels of loss over here, right? So, depending on that, I give a hearing aid with a 30 decibels amplification. So, what does it do? This 30 heard as 0 on the diseased ear, and the hearing aid, as I have given, it will add 30. 30 plus 0 is 30. So, no problem here. But what happens next? If I give the 40 decibel sound, right ear is normal, it is hearing the same 40 decibel sound. But see, the left ear, normally it is hearing that sound as 15 decibels. So that I have here given a hearing aid with 30, right? So what is happening here? Again, this is not the same 40 is not being heard on the
diseased ear, it is hearing more. Likewise, if I see for a same intensity sound, two different ears are hearing two different intensity sounds. So this won't be comfortable for the patient. At the same time, the same sound will be heard as two different sounds. This phenomena is called as diplophonia. Two different sounds will be heard at the same time, right? Likewise, similarly, your diplopia, where two different images will be seen at the same time in your eye. The same wise in your ear, two different sounds heard at the same time. That is your diplophonia. So, or diplacusis. You will call this phenomena as diplacusis event. And the other reason is the other causes like your paracusis. The paracusis is seen in case of otosclerosis, and diplacusis is seen in case of Meniere's disease, right? So on the whole, the recruitment is seen in, this may be the MCQ asked very frequently. This MCQ is being asked. This is typically seen in case of cochlear lesions like Meniere's disease, right? And coming to the CC test, that is short increment sensitivity, the name itself says short increments. I increase the sound every 5 seconds. I increase the sound by only 1 decibel intensity to the patient. The patient normally, like you and me, the normal person will not be able to differentiate this small increase in the intensity. 1 decibel, very small increase in the intensity. We cannot differentiate. But a patient with Meniere's disease will differentiate these small increments. So that CC score, so this CC score is very high in case of cochlear lesions, right? Just a minute. And so coming to the finalist, so we can see the recruitment and CC score can be seen in case of cochlear lesions. The CC score is very high in case of cochlear lesions. Recruitment phenomena seen in cochlear lesions. But your rollover phenomena is seen in retrocochlear lesions. We will discuss this part when discussing about acoustic neuroma. As well as your tone decay will be retrocochlear lesions, right? And stapedial reflex is absent in case of retrocochlear lesions, and BERA will be abnormal in case of retrocochlear lesions, right? And coming to electrocochleography, the name itself says, see, electrical potentials in the cochlea are measured in the form of a graph. That is your electrocochleography. Normally what we do, we put an electrode directly over the cochlea. Piercing through the tympanic membrane, we put the tip of the electrode on the cochlea. And see, you can see the electrode being kept inside the ear onto the cochlea. And we give a sound stimulus and we measure the electrical potentials generated inside the cochlea with the help of this electrode. So normally you get summating potentials and action potentials in this, as well as you will also get cochlear microphonics also. But at this level, it is not important. So if you take the ratio of these summating and action potentials, it will be normally less than 30%. But if it is more than 30%, that will suggest you it is a case of Meniere's disease. And coming to the other variants of Meniere's disease, there's a vestibular hydrops. That means only vestibular complaints, only vertigo will be presented by the patient. There will be no hearing loss. And coming to the other variant, cochlear hydrops, here only hearing loss is seen. That is only cochlear symptoms are seen, not the vestibular symptoms. And drop attacks, Tumarkin's otolithic crisis, you call it as. This is typically seen in case of Meniere's disease. Otolithic crisis. So what is happening? Drop attack when the patient suddenly falls down. Why? Because this otoliths, the increasing pressure on the otoliths will cause this. What are these otoliths? These are the calcium carbonate crystals present in the macula, right? In the your saccule and utricle are called as otolith organs because of this presence of otoliths. This question is also asked previously. Otoconia are made up of calcium carbonate, right? Remember that. And this Lermois syndrome is also asked recently. It's simply put, Lermois syndrome is nothing but the reverse order of the Meniere's symptoms occur. We all know there's a mnemonic I have given, the VAST. First vertigo occurs, followed by sensorineural hearing loss. But in case of Lermois syndrome, here the first sensorineural hearing loss occurs, and then after appears the vertigo. So that is your Lermois syndrome, right? So coming to the treatment part of the Meniere's disease, the medical management, You give vestibular sedatives for a short period to alleviate the symptomatic, immediate symptomatic relief to the patient. A short course of vestibular sedatives can be given. So in that time, you can send the patient for investigations like prochlorperazine, commonly famous as Temetil. So you can give that. Vasodilators like beta-histine. This will improve the blood flow to the cochlea. So prohistaminic, H1 receptors agonist. And diuretics like hydrochlorothiazide, furosemide can be given, which will decrease the water content. And that will, as the endolymph content decreases, the patient's symptoms can improve. And also even you can ask the patient to take a low salt diet as well as a caffeine free diet, right? And in case of allergens, if you find any allergic etiology, you can treat accordingly. And if hypothyroidism is found, you can treat that hypothyroidism accordingly, right? Coming to the chemical labyrinthectomy, you are doing a labyrinthectomy, means you are damaging the labyrinth chemically. That is chemical labyrinth. Which chemical you are giving here? Gentamicin. Why gentamicin? Because gentamicin is toxic to the vestibule part. It damages the sensory structures in the vestibule. So that is your, how you give to a syringe, you insert a long needle or a spinal needle and then give into the middle ear, keeping the tip of the needle in the region of the round window. So through the round window, slowly the drug diffuses inside and will damage the vestibular receptors like your macula and the crest. Other method is the microvic, Silverstein microvic. Maybe asked Silverstein microvic, the DNB exams, national board exams can ask this type of questions. So that's why I like to describe it here. In this case, you put a grommet tube first in the tympanic membrane, and the Silverstein wick is inserted through the grommet such that the tip of the wick is near the round window. So, and we will ask the patient to take the gentamicin drops in the morning and evening. So whenever he pours the drops inside, instead of the drops in his ear, through this wick, the drug will diffuse and it will go through the round window into the your membranous labyrinth, and it will damage the receptors over here. So alleviating the symptoms of the vertigo, right? So this is also important, and vasodilators also the previously asked MCQ, remember. And coming to the surgical methods, there is endolymphatic sac decompression as well as shunt. Nothing to do the endolymphatic sac decompression because there is compression inside due to the increased endolymph content. If you decompress, if you just open the endolymphatic sac, it will get decompressed. So that's the procedure is called endolymphatic sac decompression. So if you, for it for you to do this endolymphatic sac decompression, you need to identify the endolymphatic sac first. So where it is found exactly, it is found, the landmark to identify it is called as the Donaldson line. NEET PG students, the Donaldson line will come as an MCQ for you. It is nothing but, see, you have done a cortical mastectomy now. This is post cortical mastectomy picture. Here is your external auditory canal, right? This is your posterior meatal wall, right? And this is the tegment. Here your middle cranial fossa will be there. And this is the posterior wall of the mastoid. That is your sigmoid sinus will lie over this bulge here, right? Down this bulge. The posterior cranial fossa over here. So what is Donaldson line is that this is the lateral semicircular canal and this is the posterior semicircular canal, right? See the difference in their planes, arrangement in their planes. See, if you draw a line in the plane of the lateral semicircular canal, it will bisect the posterior semicircular canal into two halves. And still, if you extend this line posteriorly, below this line, you can identify the endolymphatic sac over in this region. And drill over the bone over this region and identify the sac. Just open it up. That will be the endolymphatic sac decompression. If you want to put a small tube connecting into the mastoid, then it will be an endolymphatic shunt procedure, right? And coming to the fixed sacculotomy, here nothing, you just put a small needle through the foot plate into the saccule part. The needle is introduced through the foot plate into this saccular part, such that what happens, all the fluid inside will drain out through this puncture, right? So releasing the pressure inside. So that is your fixed sacculotomy as well as Cody-Stack procedure, as well as you can also do section of vestibular nerve. See, all the irritation, all the pressure related symptoms are being caused by the transmission of nerve impulses through this vestibular nerve. If you just cut this away, these impulses cannot be sent inside. So the patient will get relief from vertigo. So likewise also you can do section of vestibular nerve. And coming to the destructive procedures. Till now, whatever we have seen are the conservative. Here, we are not causing any damage to the cochlea. No hearing loss is there because of the surgical procedure. But in this destructive procedure like labyrinthectomy means you are completely damaging the inner ear. That means apart from vertigo, you are also damaging the cochlea. The ear will become dead. That means there will be hearing loss also. So this should be done in those patients who are also having no serviceable hearing. That means completely the hearing is lost. In such cases only you need to do this destructive procedure like labyrinthectomy. Of course, the two routes are transmastoid and transcanal. That means through the mastoid you can approach the inner ear, as well as directly through the canal also you can approach the inner ear. So this destructive procedure for Meniere's disease is, this MCQ was asked in AIIMS. And the latest discovery is the Meniere device, right? So this is the Meniere device. The patient will put the probe of the device into his ear, and the Meniere device will send some intermittent low pressure pulse waves. So it sends intermittently, remember, intermittently, and low pressure pulse waves will be sent inside. So once these waves are sent inside, already you will be putting up a grommet on the tympanic membrane. You can see a grommet over the tympanic membrane. Through this grommet, the intermittent pressure waves are sent into the middle ear and then there to the round window area. See, on the round window area, the pressure waves will be sent. So these low pressure waves will be putting pressure from the perilymph onto the endolymphatic sac, right, onto the endolymphatic membrane. So counter pressuring the pressure from inside. So likewise, there will be some improvement in the symptoms for the patient, but this device has not shown significant improvement recently, right? So it is a discovery, but hasn't given yet good results, right? So this is about Meniere device. Remember, intermittent low pressure pulse therapy. So with this, we end the topic Meniere's disease, and I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity. Remember, Meniere's disease, there is the probability of getting 1 to 2 questions definitely. This is completely a conceptual, physiological, concept-based subject. So I thought of giving it without any notes. Notes will be provided to you separately as a soft copy. Okay. So I thank you all.
Thanks a lot, sir, for your very nice and interactive session. It was very awesome, sir. And students, you can follow sir's YouTube channel is also there. I'll be showing just now. I'm showing it. Where is it? Website URL. And you can go
I can
and
stop I can